Hey, I'm Todd. Thanks for choosing to watch my video, and if you would subscribe it, like it, all that stuff, that'd be great. Otherwise, enjoy the video, and I hope it gives you the information you need and is helpful to you. Take care. Alright, so I'm doing the timing belt and water pump on a 2006 Chevrolet Aveo. Took the wheel off to be looking at the brakes. That's why I'm here. Worn out. That's another story. Not sure they're going to do it right now. So I got the wheel off. For lug nuts, all nuts and bolts to be left to loosen. That's counterclockwise, right to tighten. Clockwise. You jack up the vehicle. Use safety stands, protect yourself. So I've got some good metal underneath here. Pinch weld here as well. So jack it up. Use safety stands as needed to protect yourself. You can get the wheel off because you'll probably be down here at some point. I'll take this cover off. 10mm nut and bolt. Nut, bolt. So we'll take this cover off and then we'll have access to the lower section there, the crankshaft pulley. And let's see here. Drain for the radiator. Not really seeing one, so we'll just let it probably drain out of the water pump when we loosen it up. So, alright. Get this cover off and then we'll move on. So as long as I'm down here, the belt doesn't need to be on really for any reason, so I'll probably just take it off. You can see which way to move the wrench to loosen the belt tension. Just do that and take the belt off. So this crankshaft pulley bolt is a 17mm. Use this in a 1/2-inch breaker bar or impact gun. If an impact gun shouldn't be a big deal if you're using a breaker bar. And then you probably can just wedge there's bolts here in this hole that you can get to and hold the engine from turning. Those are the torque converter bolts. You can turn the engine over till you see the bolts in the hole. Maybe have someone help you if you want, then you can have someone brace it on either side, depending if you're tightening or loosening. Just like that. There's one spot. I didn't check, there's a couple holes underneath here. Yeah.
We will be proceeding on with said wheel bearing and said front brakes also.
Oh, nice.
They'll keep you out of my hair tomorrow.
Yeah. Probably will.
This is actually kind of a cute little car, I guess.
Came off pretty darn easy. Got a keyway here. Not a lot to sit on there. And as long as I'm down here, I'm going to get any 10mm bolts for this cover that I can since I'm down here. This might be just a little different than what you'll do it, but I'm doing it because this vehicle's up in the air due to my brake inspection, so there you go. Alright, up on the top we're going to get this air cleaner assembly out of the way, and then probably engine mount below it and upper cover. So we got some stuff here. Probably a 7mm or just a flat blade screwdriver left to loosen. Can remove this here, push down and release, take that off. And again, looks like a Phillips screw or maybe 7mm. Take this off here. And then a 10mm bolt for the lower part of the air cleaner assembly. 8mm for the air cleaner, upper half. I used a 6mm for the clamp. Finally fix it? After you pulled it out?
No. We need to do it. You must edit in the voice after this.
A lot of it.
They're running his telephone on the radio.
I heard some big numbers.
Yeah. But
that's true. Maybe someone out there, though. The 10mm bolts out of this cover, and we'll get this off. A little bit of a hook here, lips and a lip. And it'll probably just make things easier for ourselves by getting the whole engine mount out of the way. Probably 17mm bolts and 14mm bolts. It's my best guess right now, and we'll support the engine underneath with a jack. Did these bolts first, and then we can jack it up, and we know that the engine mount will be lifted high enough. Got a block of wood. Just jacking up on the engine. Hey, have a good night, man. See you Tuesday. It's now not connected, and we'll zip these bolts off, nuts and bolts off here. I'm going to take that nut off, then I can move the power steering hose a little more so we can get this off.
See, I put that so far out of my mind, I forgot I got it. Alright, why are you asking me this question? I'm not texting you.
Just kind of a little friction fit here on the side. A little friction fit on the side. Kind of catches and snaps on things. We're going to go ahead and line up our timing marks then. Seems like a good time to do it. Got a white mark here and a slash on one of the teeth. So we'll see what the marks are and we'll get them lined up. So there's another indentation right there, so I'm going to line up the two indentations right in this area. So I'm probably just going to grab a couple wrenches and put them on here and turn till we get it where we need to go. And then the mark for the crankshaft will be pointing down, I believe, to a notch. So we'll show that when we're done. $17mm. So I think the belt jumped when I did that. I was turning it, so it's off a little bit by about a tooth. So there's an arrow on it, and there's a notch right there. So we're going to be lining that stuff up for our timing marks. So this is the timing belt tensioner. I think you see kind of in the middle there's two pointy arrow things. And when the tension is correct, those are supposed to be lined up, I believe. So they're off a little bit. But that should probably come with age and time. So our marks are pretty much lined up, so we can start taking things apart. Take that pulley bolt out there. Take that out there. I think they're probably... That's the water pump down there. So we'll be taking the belt off, taking that rear cover off. The water pump is behind it. So we'll be taking these two pulleys off as well. Got a nice pulley holder set up here. Get those bolts loose. Just going to slide the timing belt off. We'll take that front idler pulley off and get the belt off. So I think we're going to take this mount out of the way too to get to the timing belt tensioner, which we're going to replace. So I think there's like 2 or 3 10 or 12 millimeter bolts. None of the instructions say anything about it, but it seems to be in the way if you're going to do more than just the belt. So we're going to get it out of the way. 4 10 millimeter bolts holding that in place. Opens things up pretty nice. So they want us to loosen up the 3 water pump bolts, and we can use our water pump wrench to turn it to loosen the belt tension and remove the belt. So I have a 5 millimeter Allen. That's what I'm using to loosen up the bolts on the water pump. We'll just get in here and, as it said, turn it or turn or 2, loosen up the bolts, and we can turn the water pump with our wrench. So I need to turn the bolts a little bit more than a turn or 2. But we got coolant leaking out, so it is a little loose. I'll probably just take this pulley off and take the belt off. I think there's enough slack overall. Won't be a huge deal. Alright, so a few more turns with the bolts. Coolant's still running out, and we went counterclockwise. Counterclockwise to loosen the belt. So that's good, and then I can probably just take the belt off. I do 2 hands, but we'll just slide the belt off. Alright, So the belt's off, got the idler pulley off, coolant still draining. We'll take the two 17mm bolts out of here, get these off, and then we'll probably take the tensioner off too. A couple bolts, and then we'll probably be taking off, looks like maybe a 12mm bolt for the timing cover, rear timing cover. As you can see, that should just slide off. Alright, we'll take some stuff off. Alright, then we'll take up the three 12mm bolts for the tensioner. Got the two camshaft pulleys off. Three 12mm bolts, we'll take that off. And then a 10mm bolt here. Two 10mm bolts for the camshaft sensor, 10mm bolt over here, and then 12mm bolt down below. I think that's all of my C. That's the next process, and we'll have these things off. So here's the rear cover and the bolts, 10mm for the sensor, 10mm, 12mm, and 10mm. So there's the rear cover off. And then we can just take the water pump off. I'd maybe make a mark. I know we loosened it, but I'd maybe make a mark here so we can put it in the basic area. And we'll be turning clockwise, of course, to tighten the belt then. We'll just take these little baby bolts out, take the water pump out, and that'll be pretty much everything for removing. Now I guess on some vehicles there's a power steering pump that they're talking about that you need to worry about, but for me, it seems like the power steering pump is right there and not in the way, so a little bit of a mystery. But we'll take the water pump out and put the new one on, start putting things back together. So there's the water pump and the mounting area. So we'll maybe use a wire brush and clean it up a little bit. If you have a little, maybe 120 grit sandpaper, some kind of sandpaper, maybe a wet dry sandpaper, you get in there and clean the surface. I'll be using this, but yeah, at least do a little cleanup on there before we install it. Alright, this is where we talk about reverse procedure to install. I got the water pump in there and installed, but it does turn because we're going to need to use that to adjust the timing belt tension. So we got that installed, then we'll install the cover, I do believe, and then we'll install the tensioner and the pulleys. So when we get back, we'll have all that installed and I'll give you some torque specs. So you can see how things interlock. We have this little notch on here, and we have this here on the back cover. Got a couple spots where there's notches. So be aware of that. So we'll be clicking into place basically. Here. the cover, the lower cover. Oh, it's inside here actually yet. So that's what's snapping into place on these. Just give you a little tip there. Hopefully it'll help. We'll get this installed now. All right, they say they want 62 inch-pounds on the camshaft sensor, 89 inch-pounds on the cover bolts. I think that bolt down below the 12mm could go a little tighter, but I don't find a spec on it, so that's where I'm at. A smidge more. And we'll put the camshaft and the timing belt tensioner and the idler pulley on and give you some torque specs for those. Righty-tighty. Alright, 30 foot-pounds for the idler on the right, and then 18 foot-pounds for the 3 tensioner bolts on the left there. Alright, 49 foot-pounds for the 2 bolts there. Also put some marks on the gears up here, and also on the old belt. It's a trick you can use too to make sure it goes in the same spot. So you can count the teeth and then maybe transfer it over to your new belt. So that way you know your old paint marks and line up on the new for the cam. And you know you're in good shape. Of course, if the belt wasn't broken. So, probably a little disclosure that like I mentioned, the timing belt jumped while I was turning it, so the marks weren't accurate, so my paint marks weren't accurate. So if you're going to do any, as long as your belt's good, before you do any paint, before you take the belt off or do any moving, if you make marks, make sure that your timing belt hasn't jumped, because I believe mine jumped. Because these marks on the top are not right, so I'm just going to focus on the 2 marks they tell you to focus on right there, and then the crankshaft. So got the belt down on the crankshaft. So then we're going to go around the idler, then we're going to go around here, and around the tensioner, and then the water pump pulley last. So that's what we're going to do. And we do want as little slack as possible, so try and make sure it's as tight as possible. And I get a little clamp on here to hold it all in place, and we'll continue on and just make sure our marks line up right there. Alright, so we're going to be turning the water pump to tighten the belt. And we want this arrow here to go to this notch right here. So that's what's going to be going on. It's a very tight fit in there. You might need a mirror to see the notch, but when you're turning the water pump, that is your goal, to get this arrow to move right to here. So we do have some slack up here. This naturally wants to wander, but once we start turning the water pump, we can hopefully allow this camshaft in the back to turn as well, take up the slack, and get our tensioner to line up. As we talked about, so we turn the water pump clockwise. Hope you can see that. Looks to be pretty darn close. So I think I might just leave it there. Pretty happy with the marks. Then we'll tighten up the water pump pulley bolts to torque spec. Alright, so they want those 3 water pump bolts tightened to 89 inch-pounds. So it doesn't sound like a lot, but there it is. So tighten them up, 89 inch-pounds, everything's tight. And they want you probably to turn the engine over twice. Put the bolt in the crankshaft, put the pulley and the bolt on the crankshaft, turn it over by hand twice, and verify your marks and tensioner. Lining up right there, and then you'll continue to put it back together. If not, you'll need to take it apart a little bit and make some adjustments. Okay. This is how it works. Turn the water pump until this arrow gets up into the groove. Then snug down the water pump bolts a little bit, it says slightly. Then turn the engine over by hand 2 times till your timing marks are aligned again. Then you want to loosen up the water pump pulley bolts a little bit so you can turn it back, and you want this arrow to be here, and you want the arrow to come back to line up with this other arrow. So tighten it up here, tighten the water pump bolts, turn the engine over a couple times, line up the marks, then loosen the water pump pulley till it lines up with this arrow here, 2 arrows align. Then tighten the water pump pulley bolts to 89 inch-pounds. Alright, so we've turned our engine over by hand 2 times, got our marks lined up. We're gonna got the water pump pulley, got the water pump loosened up, and we're gonna move the water pump to line up our marks.
Chestnuts roasting.
Alright, looks like our 2 arrows are lined up, and we can tighten the water pump down to 89 inch-pounds. Alright, then we install the bracket and the 410mm bolts to about 44 foot-pounds. Now we'll install the lower and upper cover, and those bolts are 89 inch-pounds. Remember how they kind of snap together? Alright, best I can tell, they want those to about 30 foot-pounds and those to 41. Best advice, make them tight. Don't forget to put the nut back on that bracket back there for the part string hose. Alright, then put the pulley on, tighten it down by hand, make sure everything's engaged. There's not a lot there to engage with. Tighten it down to 70 foot-pounds, and then I want you to do additional 30 degrees, then additional 15 degrees. For some reason, not 45, but 30 and then 15. So get that done there. Of course, you got your hole there for holding everything in place. Shouldn't really be a problem for you. There we go. We'll put the belt on it. And we'll add some coolant. Pretty safe reverse procedure to install at this point. I think you have everything you need to know. So, plug on here. Alright, so we put things back together how we found them. These are looking pretty good. We're going to add some coolant. We have a machine that's going to kind of do a vacuum fill for us, but I'm going to expect you should add a gallon to a gallon and a half. There's some marks over here. Minimum, probably maximum. You can read that on the camera. So what we'll do is fill it up to the maximum, maybe a little more. Then we're going to run it and put the heater on so we get nice hot air. It'll take about hopefully 10 or 15 minutes of running. We'll start to feel some warmth and some heat, and we can keep running it. If after about 15 minutes you don't feel any heat, you can rev it up to 2,000 RPMs and hopefully get some more circulation going, then usually that works. And if not, you might have to shut it off, let it cool down, take the radiator cap off. It's just a screw on, screw off radiator cap. So let it cool off maybe for half an hour and then try and add more fluid to it. Sometimes you get air pockets, but if you get a gallon, gallon and a half in it, you should be darn good, I believe. So I'll let you know after I'm done filling it how much it took for me. Alright. So after running it and a test drive and letting it cool off, you take your cap off and verify the fluid level. Again, there's a minimum and maximum arrow on the side here. Top it off as needed with a nice 50-50 mix of coolant. And I did put like 1 gallon in here for me, 1.25 gallons. So that's how much I put in of fluid.